It's the biggest public health problem in America, the rising rates of obesity among our young people and very heavy statistics among our adult population. This quote was said by Bill Clinton in 1999 during his speech to address growing obesity rates in America during his presidency. This quote from over 2 decades ago continues to reflect the situation that has grown and is ongoing in our American society. Obesity has become an ongoing issue in American society. According to the National Institute of Diabetes and Digestive and Kidney Diseases, nearly 1 in 3 adults, 30.7%, are overweight. More than 2 in 5 adults, 42.4%, have obesity, and about 1 in 11 adults, 9.2%, have severe obesity. These statistics alone prove the state of health our country is currently in and moving towards. While the obesity rate in adults is concerning, the situation involving children is also becoming a widespread issue, with about 1 in 6 children, 16.1%, being overweight, almost 1 in 5 children, 19.3%, having obesity, and about 1 in 16 children, 6.1%, having severe obesity. If these statistics alone aren't enough, the NIH provides a graph, as shown on the slide, of the prevalence of obesity in adults, separating them in groups of age and sex. It can be shown that there is no significant differences in prevalence of obesity by sex or age group, as each group has about 40% or over for their population that is obese. Experts in the National Library of Medicine predict that by 2030, nearly half of US adults will be obese, including the nearly 1 in 4 who will have severe obesity. The obesity rate will surpass 50% in 29 different states throughout the entire country, and the rate would continue to grow, spreading like wildfire. It is a crucial time for efforts to be made before the problem gets worse. One of the main tools that the general population and researchers use to track personal and countrywide health is the BMI, otherwise known as the Body Mass Index test. The BMI test, one of the main tools of our country in tracking health, has also been shown to provide inaccurate results of participants who use this test. This brings me to my research question today. To what extent does the Body Mass Index test negatively portray the results of the average adult in the United States? I will be comparing the BMI test to another more accurate test for body composition, the InBody test machine. To begin, you may be asking, what is the BMI test and how does it work? It is a measurement used to assess an individual's body composition based on their height and weight. The metric formula for the BMI test is BMI is equal to weight in kilograms divided by height in meters squared. The resulting BMI number is then categorized into different ranges indicating whether the person is underweight, normal weight, overweight, or obese. So the BMI categories, the 4 of them, are as followed with their BMI score. So underweight is if the BMI score is less than 18.5. Normal weight is if the BMI score is from 18.5 to 24.9. Overweight is if the BMI score is 25 to 29.9. And obese is if the BMI score comes out to 30 or higher. The InBody test, similar to the BMI, tracks body composition by using bioelectrical impedance analysis. To precisely measure body composition, it sends multiple electrical currents throughout the body, resulting in up to 6 different impedance readings for the trunk and each of the 4 limbs. It allows for one to measure both body fat percentage and muscle mass, in addition to what the BMI doesn't have. Body fat percentage is the proportion of fat that your body contains compared to everything else, such as muscles, bones, water, and organs. This statistic is used to separate people into different health categories, similar to what the BMI does with the BMI score. Muscle mass refers to the total weight of all the muscles in the body. This includes skeletal muscles, smooth muscles, and cardiac muscles. The Body Mass Index BMI is commonly used for several reasons. It offers a straightforward and a quick assessment of a person's body weight in relation to their height, making it a convenient tool for medical professionals and individuals to evaluate potential health risks in the body. It's inexpensive to use, as it's accessible to anyone. You can access it online. However, its simplicity also happens to be its weak point. According to the CDC, about 18% of all data collected from the BMI is listed as incorrect and misleading. This brings me to my research gap. The gap in my research is to test the discrepancy caused by the BMI test. Researchers are researching for a new way to account for the gap caused by the BMI, in which I propose the InBody test. By comparing these 2 results from the 2 different tests, it will reveal how accurate the BMI is and whether or not its widespread usage should continue, or if we should begin to start moving away from the BMI and towards a better resource for tracking the general health of the population, such as what I proposed, the InBody test machine. As shown on the slide, there's two types of tests that will be used for this research experiment. The BMI test will be conducted by collecting the height and weight of a participant and inputting it into a BMI calculator as shown on the slide. Any of these BMI calculators can be found online. It will then provide us with a BMI score that will categorize the volunteer into one of the 4 BMI categories as I have listed before: underweight, normal weight, overweight, and obese. The other test is the InBody test. This test will require for the participant to use an InBody machine, which is commonly found in gyms, public locations, and can also be purchased for personal use. It will have the participant stand on the machine, hold the sides with their thumbs for about 30 seconds. Then it will print out a sheet with all of the results that are shown on the paper in the slide. This includes our weight, skeletal muscle mass, body fat mass, the different parts of our limbs, and our trunk. These two different test results will be compared side by side for each participant to see if the BMI result is considered accurate or inaccurate. This brings us to our methodology. The method of how participants will be collected is separated into a 3-step wave process. All participants are selected at random and agree to the experiment by signing off on paperwork beforehand. The first wave of participants will be taken from a gym or a setting where physical activity is the main focus. This is to increase the chances of subjects willing to participate. Optimum Nutrition states that the American people are concerned about their physical fitness, which has led to an uprising in the amount of gym memberships that people have signed up for over the last couple of years. The next wave of participants will be taken from everyday locations, such as grocery stores and shopping malls. This will ensure that the results of the common man are portrayed. In America alone, about 96% of people know of Walmart, and about 71% of people shop there consistently. However, according to the CDC, only 24.2% of people in our society in the United States meet the exercise requirement. The last wave of participants will be taken from a clinical setting in order to ensure that the participants are interested in their health, therefore persuading participants to be interested in the results of tests that categorize their health. These different waves will prove to collect data from many different perspectives, allowing for a wide variety in results. As stated before, volunteers will be given paperwork to fill out before signing off onto the experiment. An example of this paperwork is shown on the slide. The paperwork will be split into 3 different sections in order to make sure participants are clear on what they are participating in. Section 1 explains the experiment and provides information on how to fill out the form. Section 2 of the paperwork provides informational questions that will be used for statistical analysis, such as age, gender, race, just demographic information as a whole. And then there's also the option to include their email if they would like a copy of the project. The final section of the paper shows 3 required questions that relate to the physical fitness of the volunteer. So these physical questions are about how often they exercise, how much time they spend exercising when they do decide to exercise, and whether or not they track their diet. Finally, participants are required to sign below to make sure that they agree to all of the following statements and terms listed. All of the questions are asked in order to try and account for as many different areas as possible to limit outside error. This brings us to the beginning of our results. As shown on the slide, these are the results of the answers of 2 of the fitness questions asked on the paperwork. The first fitness question that was asked was aimed at trying to determine how often the volunteer participates in the physical activity regularly. This could include going to the gym, walking, running, or participating in a sport. Most fitness and wellness articles, such as the one in the NCI, say that an adult should aim to obtain 5 days of exercise in a week, split into 30-minute increments, to ensure the healthiest body for your individual. The majority of volunteers claim that they participate in physical activity on a daily basis, while the rest was dispersed within the rest of the answer choices. Following this question, participants were asked how much time they spent conducting a physical activity when they were participating in one. The Center for Disease and Control recommends that one works their way up to 150 minutes of moderate to intense aerobic activities to maintain the health of the body. They also mention how workouts can be split into different amounts of days and time limits depending on the person and their schedule, to include versatility. The majority of respondents chose the 1 to 2 hours with the amount of time they spend conducting a physical activity. The next in the lead was the most responses being 3+ hours, and then finally it was less than 1 hour for the least amount of respondents. By volunteers answering these 2 questions, It provides a reflection of their physical activity day by day and the amount of time each physical activity takes, giving us more information when interpreting our results. The graph on the left that is shown on the slide portrays the BMI of all the participants. The results came from the measurements of height and weight. Most of the participants placed in the 25 to 29.9 category with their BMI score, labeling them as overweight. The next greatest number of participants fell under the 30 plus body weight category with their BMI score being 30 plus, listing them as obese. Only one of the participants fell under the BMI score less than 18, listing them as underweight. And the remaining participants were within the normal BMI range, which is when your BMI score is from 18.5 to 24.9. The graph on the right shows the body fat percentage of all the participants. Most placed within the normal healthy range of body fat percent, which is 14 to 22%. Equal number of participants placed under the categories of 7 to 13% and 23 to 36%. Now, some outside participants placed under the 2 to 6 body fat percentage, which could be considered unhealthy in certain situations, even though it is low, and only one participant placed in the 37% body fat category, which is considered unhealthy in certain circumstances as well. So now to our analysis. The results of the experiment proved to show that a discrepancy was found between the two tests. Participants' answers from all the questions were taken into account when interpreting their specific results from both tests. As shown through all of the results, it can be said that there is a difference between the results of what participants would get from the BMI test based on their BMI score and what their muscle mass and body fat percentage results would say from the InBody test. For example, in one of the participants' results, the volunteer was listed as overweight from his BMI result. From both his height and weight, he got a BMI of 25.4. So when you categorize that BMI score, they list that person as overweight. Once the InBody test was taken on that volunteer, he had a 12.6% body fat percentage and 87.1 pounds of muscle. Those results alone from the InBody test indicate that he, as a volunteer, is in really good shape and is in fact not overweight, which is what the body mass index test indicated. The advice coming from the BMI test is not what the InBody test would have indicated. This same situation was reflected in multiple participants, as their answers from their fitness questions would also happen to reflect the results that was coming from the InBody test and would not reflect the result that came from the BMI score. About 65% of participants had a body mass index score that was completely misleading and did not properly portray the results at all. The advice that participants would get from being categorized into one of those 4 categories would not be what their current body composition was. This means that the BMI provided a score that would completely miscategorize them, labeling them as someone that they're not in terms of body composition. 15% of the participants had a body mass index score that had some sort of indication of what their actual body composition was. And the final 20% of participants got a body mass index score that was fairly accurate and close to what was represented in the volunteer's body composition in both the InBody test and BMI test. The limitations of the experiment are the room for error and the total number of participants using the experiment. While the InBody machine is the most accurate machine someone may have access to public locations, there is still room for error in this test, as you are not required to take off all your clothing and only required to use your hands and feet to test. While there are more accurate machines, they are more expensive and not as commonly placed as the InBody machines throughout public society. Another limitation is the total number of participants used in the experiment. Every human has a different DNA coding for their body, meaning that in order to create a controlled experiment with limited to no outside influences on the participants' body composition, all the participants would have to be genetically identical in the way their body regulates itself in ways such as digestion and energy consumption. Though this is practically impossible, the more subjects used in this study could help to account for the boundaries created by the genetic differences. The question of how one could always find a way to better their health will continue to be researched as society is given more tools to allow people to meet their specific needs and reach their own personal goals, whether it be dietary or physical. With a more convenient machine that takes the same amount of space up as a normal scale that you'd find in Publix, more accurate results can be obtained through the InBody machine, providing medical settings with more accurate information to not make sure that all medical practices completed on them is within their healthy limits, but also to allow for patients to get more accurate medical advice for their specific body composition from both clinics and on their own, such as through the internet. Advancements in this field allow for the populations to be given the opportunity to better their health, something that, as Optium Nutrition stated earlier, most people are striving for. In the pursuit of healthier lives, people will begin to have more accurate tools to get them to that level. And these are my references.
Okay, your first question is, how did the choices you made when designing or implementing your research method impact your research process?
So the main choice that impacted how I implemented my research process into a way where statistical analysis was appropriate was by creating paperwork for participants to fill out. On this paperwork, participants provided different type of information that would correspond to their demographics and help categorize them in the type of people that are participating in this experiment. The questionnaire also allowed participants to give information involving their physical background, which could help give an explanation to why the results came out the way it did.
Okay. Next question. Think back to the initial curiosity that sparked your inquiry. What other curiosities do you have, and how has this process prepared you to explore them?
Some other curiosities that I have include trying to find out more information about the human body. So this relates to the BMI because this could include my curiosity is the role that genetic coding plays in muscle building in different people. So this process has opened many doors for me in this experiment, and it has taught me how to approach participants, how to ask for resources, and how to properly conduct the study, making it as fair as possible, especially if it's something involving the medical history and background of participants.
Okay. And then, this kind of ties into that, what was the most important research skill you developed as a result of this process, and how might you apply it to future endeavors?
So the most important research skill that I developed as a result of my research process was specifically the data collection and separating results based on their different categories. So the study has taught me to become more organized with my results, which allows for me to reach an analysis in a more understanding way, where I'm not mixing up any of my results or I'm not reaching to get a conclusion that I want. Instead of going back and forth, I separated each of my answers from each paper into a different chart for each specific participant. But I also had a cumulative graph at the end for each of the specific questions, so I could do an analysis on both a small and larger scale. So if someone would like a personal answer for their specific part, I could give that, but if I was also to do an overview and an average, I would also be able to provide that answer as well.